Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Do want to switch gears, though, and I do want to talk a little bit about Georgia, okay? Because as I said to lead the show, I think there's this narrative of, oh, Georgia's got a Bama problem and Kirby can't figure out Bama. First of all, I'll defend Georgia. Not a lot of people have Bama figured out over the last couple of years, okay? And so we said the stat earlier, but in Georgia's last 51 games, they're 48-3, but only 1-3 against Bama, so they're 47-0 against everybody else. And I think everybody's focused on the Bama stat whatever. But to me, this Georgia team has bigger issues, bigger problems, not, again, I hate to be a jerk, but not Oklahoma problems, not Auburn problems, not Arkansas problems. But this was a team that was number one in the country to start the season, and I haven't really seen it. And so to me, when I look at Georgia, it's what I say on this show all the time. I think two things can be true. I think we absolutely, positively should give Georgia credit for the rally, for the comeback, for being in position to win the game down 28-0 and 30-7 at the half. But we are now a third of the way through the season for Georgia, and I think there are some big picture issues for this team. So let's go ahead and dive into the Georgia perspective. And again, I don't want to dismiss what Georgia did in coming back. They were down 28-0. They were down 30-7 at the half. There are a lot of teams that, frankly, either would have quit or, bottom line, just aren't good enough to make a comeback. Georgia was able to put up that slew of points middle of the third quarter on into the fourth quarter, take that 34-33 lead, okay? So I don't want to dismiss them because there's a lot of teams that would have quit, and there's a lot of teams that just frankly would not have been good enough to make up that deficit. And to Georgia's credit, they did. So I don't want to undersell it. I don't want to underappreciate what they've done. And I don't want to make it sound like this is a negative, Georgia's the worst program that's ever walked the face of the earth thing. But at the same time, what I will say, I saw what I believe to be a little bit of a revisionist history after this game. Like after this, it was a great game. But let's not pretend that Georgia played a great game. They played about a great, probably if there's 30 minutes in a half, they probably played a great 18 minutes, 20 minutes. And so I saw all this like, well, Bama should be number one, and how can you not have Georgia too? And it's like, did I watch the same game that everybody else did? Because I want to give Georgia credit for the comeback, but there also are problems that seemingly are continuing to emerge that we got to talk about, okay? So first off, let me say this. Carson Beck, for whatever reason, is regressing, okay? Not knock on him as a person, as a character, as a leader, as a whatever. And I'm not smart enough to know why. Is it the Brock Bowers thing, not having Brock Bowers, whatever? But he's regressed. As a matter of fact, it was funny because, I got old takes exposed on Saturday night because I put out a tweet middle of the second quarter when he was awful. And I said, this is the part where Carson Beck should be thankful that Dylan Raiola decommitted, because this is probably the spot where Carson Beck gets benched and he might lose his spot going forward. So, of course, old takes exposed when Georgia took the lead, retweeted that tweet. I take back nothing. I don't apologize for anything I said. This guy has regressed, okay? This was a guy, and by the way, it's not just my opinion, but a fact. First of all, Saturday night, great final stat line, great yardage line. He wasn't great, though. 27 of 50 passing, that's 54%. 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. But take my opinion about Carson Beck out of it, okay? Take my opinion about Carson Beck out of it, and let's just look at the facts. The facts of the matter are that this season, last year, he completed 72% of his passes. This year, through a third of the season, he's completing 62%. He has 3 interceptions after having 6 all of last year. This guy's not as good. Not saying he can't get there, not saying he's terrible, not saying he's this, not saying he's that. I'm just saying right now he ain't the dude that he was a year ago. Also worth noting, the run game. Now, I know part of it, they faced really good defenses in Kentucky. They faced really good defense in Clemson. They faced really good defense in Bama. And again, they fell behind against Bama, so it was one of those where they had to throw the football. Same time, let's not ignore the facts here, and here are the facts. Last year, they were a top 25 run offense. This year, they're ranked 102nd nationally, 80 yards rushing against Bama, 102 yards against Kentucky. I don't think that's going to get it done as the season goes on. And oh, by the way, the run defense, they can't stop the run. Again, maybe part of it was Jalen Milroe is awesome, but 173 yards against Bama, 170 yards against Kentucky. And let's have an honest conversation about Georgia. Get in the comments. Tell me if you disagree. Look at Georgia. They've played 4 games. Let's take out the Tennessee Tech game. Okay, Tennessee Tech doesn't count. Not a real team as far as I'm concerned. They played a good half against Clemson, but the first half, Clemson was every bit their equal. And then on top of that, against Kentucky, they could have and maybe should have lost. And so you look at the Bama game, they got blown out the first half. I mean, we're talking about a team that through a quarter of their season has probably basically played one good stretch against Clemson, one good stretch against Alabama. Other than that, they haven't come close to reaching their potential. And so you see the schedule on the screen right now. Look at the schedule. Now, I will say you get about as soft of a landing these next couple weeks. Auburn at home, Mississippi State at home, okay. But then mid-October, you go to Texas. Texas is a better team right now. And I could not believe when I saw people on Saturday night, well, Alabama's number 1 and Georgia's number 2. It's like, did we watch the same game? Are we watching the same sport? Stop looking at a box score and pay attention to the game. You got at Texas. You got Florida after the bye. Florida stinks, okay. But then you have at Ole Miss and Tennessee back-to-back. I know Ole Miss lost. We're going to talk about that game in a minute as far as what does it mean from the Kentucky perspective. But Ole Miss can still put up points. Ole Miss, I think, just played their worst game of the season in part because they hadn't been tested yet. And then Tennessee might be one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country, probably is one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country. And so I just bring it up because maybe Georgia just needed to get this loss out of the way. Maybe they're going to get right. But this is not, to me, like an upper level team right now. And I think if you're Georgia, you got to be careful. Like we talked about the schedule in the preseason, and I think guys like me dismissed it. Oh, it's Georgia. They'll figure out a way. All of a sudden, Tennessee looks better than we thought. All of a sudden, Texas might be the best team in the country. Tennessee might be the best team in the country for all we know. Ole Miss, even though they lost, I don't think is like the 11th best team in the SEC. I think they're like the 5th or 6th best team in the SEC that had a bad Saturday against Kentucky in an SEC opener when it was Kentucky's 3rd game. And so to me, if you're looking for some saving graces for Georgia, it's obviously one that, everybody's got a tough schedule in the SEC. You have time to get right. And maybe, by the way, the schedule has just been tougher. Clemson has looked awesome since the second half of that Georgia game. Kentucky maybe is better than we thought they were, is almost certainly better than we thought they were, and you survived that game. But I look at this Georgia team. The other saving grace, by the way, is we're in a 12-team playoff era. This is like the NFL. You don't have to be perfect in week 1, week 2, week 3, or September, but get better as the season goes on. But I bring it up because I keep hearing this like, oh, Georgia's as good as anybody. Are they? They're better than Texas with Quinn Ewers? They're better than Tennessee right now? I'm sorry. I don't see it. Don't want to dismiss Georgia. I'm not saying they can't make the playoff. I'm not even saying they can't make it to the SEC championship game and win it. But this notion right now that they're right on the cusp, they're nowhere close. I think Kirby Smart has a lot of things to figure out.